The passport officer stared at my ID and asked, "How are you traveling when you're supposed to be in prison?" I froze at the customs desk at LAX, my boarding pass for London crumpled in my sweaty palm. The officer, a stern-faced woman named Miss Krill according to her badge, was typing something into her computer with increasing urgency. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to croak out, because this had to be some kind of mistake. I'd never been arrested for anything more serious than a parking ticket. She turned her monitor toward me, and there it was in official government font. Jax Riley, convicted of armed robbery and assault, sentenced to 15 years at California State Prison. Current status, incarcerated. "That's not me," I said, my voice shaking. "I've never been to prison. I work at a marketing firm in Portland." Miss Krill's expression softened slightly, but she still looked suspicious. "Sir, I need you to step over here with me." She gestured toward a small office behind the customs booths. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode as I followed her, dragging my rolling suitcase like a guilty person, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Other travelers were staring now, probably thinking they were watching someone get arrested for terrorism or drug smuggling. Inside the office, Miss Krill pulled up more information on her screen. "According to this, you were convicted 3 years ago for robbing a convenience store in Fresno and beating the clerk with a tire iron." I stared at the screen in horror. The conviction date was 3 years ago, when I was working my first job out of college and living in a tiny apartment in Portland. I had never been to Fresno in my life. "There has to be some mistake," I said, pulling out my phone to show her photos of my life. "Look, here's me at work last week. Here's my apartment lease. I can call my boss right now." Miss Krill studied the photos but still looked unconvinced. "Sir, identity theft happens, but usually people steal identities to avoid prison, not to go to prison." She had a point that made my stomach drop even further. "Why would someone use my name to get convicted of crimes I didn't commit?" "Let me check a few more things," she said, typing rapidly. After what felt like forever, she looked up with a puzzled expression. "This is strange. The booking photo for Jax Riley looks exactly like you, but the fingerprints on file don't match the ones in your passport application." My head was spinning trying to process this information. I asked to see the booking photo, and when she turned the screen toward me, I nearly fell out of my chair. The person in the orange jumpsuit looked exactly like me. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same scar above my left eyebrow from falling off my bike when I was 8. But it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me because I remembered exactly where I was 3 years ago when this person was apparently getting arrested. "This is insane," I whispered, staring at what looked like my identical twin in a prison uniform. Miss Krill was making phone calls now, speaking in low tones to what sounded like supervisors and possibly law enforcement. I caught fragments of her conversation. "Unusual identity discrepancy, possible fraud, need immediate verification." She hung up and turned back to me. "Mr. Riley, we're going to need to hold you here while we sort this out. This could take several hours." The waiting room they put me in was sterile and cold, with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. I tried calling my mom, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried my best friend Trey, same thing. It was like the universe was conspiring against me when I needed witnesses to my normal life most desperately. After 2 hours, a man in a suit walked in and introduced himself as Agent Foster from some government department I'd never heard of. He sat across from me with a thick file folder and a laptop computer. "Mr. Riley, we've been investigating a case involving identity fraud and falsified criminal records. Your situation appears to be connected to a larger scheme we've been tracking." My mouth went dry because this sounded way more serious than a simple mix-up at passport control. Agent Foster opened his laptop and showed me a spreadsheet with dozens of names, including mine. "Over the past 5 years, someone has been systematically creating false criminal records for real people. The victims are usually young adults with clean records and stable employment." He scrolled down the list, and I saw name after name with similar patterns. "But why?" I asked, because none of this made any sense. "We're still investigating, but we believe it's connected to a private prison corporation that gets paid based on occupancy rates. Creating fake convictions helps them justify their federal contracts." The implications of what he was saying made me feel sick. Someone had basically sold me into slavery to fill a prison quota, except I wasn't actually in prison because I'd never been arrested. Agent Foster continued explaining while I tried not to throw up. "The scheme works because most people never check their own criminal background. You only found out because you tried to travel internationally." He showed me more documents, including what looked like court transcripts from my fake trial. Someone had hired a public defender to represent me, and that attorney had apparently entered a guilty plea on my behalf. "This is completely illegal," I said, stating the obvious. "How is this even possible?" Agent Foster's expression was grim as he explained how the scheme worked. Corrupt court clerks, fake attorneys, and falsified paperwork had created an entire shadow justice system. The private prison company, Cornerstone Corrections, was paying bribes to keep their facilities at capacity even when crime rates dropped. The investigation that followed consumed the next 8 months of my life. I had to hire my own attorney, Linda Vex, who specialized in identity theft cases. She worked for free because she said my case could help expose the entire fraud scheme. We spent weeks gathering evidence of my real whereabouts during the time I was supposedly in prison. Bank records, work timesheets, apartment lease agreements, even photos from social media with timestamps proving I was in Portland when Jax Riley was supposedly getting arrested in Fresno. Linda filed motions to have the fake conviction expunged, but the legal process moved incredibly slowly. Meanwhile, I couldn't travel internationally, couldn't pass background checks for apartment rentals, and lived in constant fear that someone would see my name in the system and assume I was a dangerous criminal. The worst part was telling my family what happened. My parents initially thought I was lying about the conviction, especially when they Googled my name and found news articles about the armed robbery. "But Jax," my mom said over the phone, her voice breaking, "the man in this mugshot looks exactly like you." I had to explain the entire identity theft scheme while they struggled to believe such a thing was even possible. My dad, who worked in banking, immediately understood the financial implications. "Son, this could destroy your credit, your career, everything." He started researching identity theft protection services and attorneys, while my mom worried about what the neighbors would think. My younger sister Pip stopped talking to me for 2 months because she was embarrassed to be related to someone with a criminal record even though it was fake. Linda discovered that 47 other people had been victims of the same scheme. She organized a class action action lawsuit against Cornerstone Corrections and the county court system in Fresno. Our first group meeting was held in a conference room at her law firm, and seeing all those faces was both comforting and terrifying. There was a teacher who lost her job when the fake conviction showed up on a background check, a nurse who couldn't renew her license, a father who was denied custody of his children during divorce proceedings because of his fake criminal record. We were all living versions of ourselves, dealing with consequences for crimes we never committed. The stories were so similar it was clearly a systematic operation, not random identity theft. The media attention started after Linda held a press conference about our lawsuit. Local news stations picked up the story, then national outlets. I found myself on CNN explaining how someone had stolen my identity to create a fake conviction. The reporter kept asking if I was sure I hadn't committed the crime and just forgotten about it, which made me want to scream. "You don't forget robbing a store and beating someone with a tire iron," I said, probably sounding more angry than I should have on national television. But the coverage helped other victims come forward. Within a month, we had identified over 100 people who had been given fake criminal records by the same scheme. The FBI raid on Cornerstone Corrections happened 6 months after my airport encounter. Linda called me at work to tell me they were finally taking action against the company. I watched the news coverage from my desk, seeing federal agents carrying boxes of evidence out of corporate offices. The CEO, Dale Finch, was arrested along with 12 other executives and employees. The fake court clerk who had processed my false conviction was also arrested. Seeing their mugshots on the news felt like justice, but it didn't immediately fix my destroyed reputation. The fake conviction was still in the system, still showing up on background checks, still ruining my life on a daily basis. Getting the conviction expunged required a court hearing where I had to prove my innocence of a crime I never committed. Linda presented our evidence to a judge who looked appropriately shocked by the entire situation. Bank records showing I was in Portland when the robbery happened in Fresno, work attendance records, security camera footage from my apartment building, even testimony from friends and co-workers who remembered seeing me during the time I was supposedly in prison. The judge ruled in our favor and ordered the false conviction removed from all databases, but warned that it could take months for the information to update across all systems. "Mr. Riley," she said, looking at me with something like sympathy, "this court sincerely apologizes for the failure of our justice system." The apology didn't fix the damage to my life. I had already lost one job opportunity because of the background check. My credit score had been destroyed by fake court fines that went to collections. I couldn't rent a decent apartment because landlords saw the criminal record and rejected my applications immediately. Even after the conviction was officially expunged, traces of it lingered in internet search results and private databases. Linda explained that completely cleaning up identity theft damage could take years, even with court orders. "The internet never forgets," she said grimly, "especially when it comes to criminal records." I started using a reputation management service to try to push down the negative search results, but progress was slow and expensive. Therapy became necessary when I started having panic attacks every time I had to show my ID to someone. The therapist, Dr. Kim, specialized in trauma from identity theft and fraud. She explained that what I experienced was a form of psychological assault, having my entire identity weaponized against me by strangers. "Your sense of self has been violated," she said during one session. "It's normal to feel paranoid and anxious about your own name." The therapy helped, but I still checked my criminal background report obsessively, terrified that new fake charges might appear. Dr. Kim taught me coping strategies for the anxiety, but admitted that complete trust in the system might never fully return. "You've seen behind the curtain," she said. "You know how easily someone can destroy your life with paperwork." The class action settlement took 2 years to finalize. Cornerstone Corrections agreed to pay $50 million to the victims, which worked out to about $300,000 each after legal fees. The money helped, but it couldn't repair the psychological damage or the years of stress. Some victims had lost marriages because their spouses couldn't handle being associated with fake criminals. Others had permanent damage to their careers in fields that required clean background checks. The teacher in our group never got her job back, even after the conviction was expunged. Parents had lost custody battles. People had been denied housing, loans, and employment opportunities. The settlement money felt like compensation for having our lives destroyed by corporate greed and systematic corruption. Dale Finch, the Cornerstone CEO, got sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, bribery, and racketeering. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that he got the same sentence I was supposedly serving for armed robbery. During his sentencing hearing, he apologized to the victims and claimed he never intended for innocent people to be hurt. Linda laughed bitterly when she read that quote to our support group. "He knew exactly what he was doing," she said. "Creating fake criminals was the whole business model." The court clerk who processed my false conviction got 3 years. The fake public defender who entered my guilty plea got disbarred and sentenced to 5 years. It felt like justice, but it couldn't undo the trauma of believing my own government had labeled me a violent criminal. Rebuilding my life after the settlement required moving to a different city where nobody knew about my case. I relocated to Denver and started over with a new job, new apartment, and new social circle. I didn't tell people about the identity theft initially because explaining it was exhausting, and most people couldn't comprehend how such a thing was possible. Dating was complicated because background checks are standard now, and I had to explain why searches of my name might still bring up old articles about fake convictions. I met Sarah at a coffee shop near my new apartment, and after we'd been seeing each other for 2 months, I finally told her the whole story. She listened with wide eyes and then Googled my name immediately. "Holy shit," she said, scrolling through news articles. "This actually happened to you." Sarah became my strongest supporter during the final stages of legal cleanup. She helped me monitor my credit reports and online reputation. When we decided to move in together, she dealt with landlords who had questions about my background check discrepancies. Having someone who believed my story completely made an enormous difference in my mental health. Dr. Kim said that support from trusted people was crucial for recovery from identity theft trauma. "You need witnesses to your real life," she explained. "People who can confirm that you are who you say you are." Sarah was that witness, along with my family and close friends who had stuck by me throughout the whole ordeal. 3 years after that day at LAX, I finally took the international trip I had been planning. planning. Sarah and I flew to London for our honeymoon, and when I handed my passport to the customs officer, my heart still raced. But the officer just stamped it and waved us through without any drama. Standing in Heathrow Airport, I realized I had been holding my breath for 3 years, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The fake conviction was really gone from the system. I was finally free to be myself again, not some corporate scheme's version of a criminal. Sarah squeezed my hand as we walked toward baggage claim, and I felt like I was reclaiming my own identity after years of fighting for it. The support group Linda organized continued meeting monthly, even after the settlement was distributed. We had all been through something that most people couldn't understand, and talking to others who had lived it helped process the ongoing trauma. Some members were doing better than others. The nurse had gotten her license back and found a new job. The father had regained custody of his children, but others were still struggling with anxiety, depression, and trust issues. We all agreed that the experience had changed us permanently. You can't unknow that your entire identity can be stolen and weaponized, one member said during a meeting. It changes how you see everything. We were survivors of a crime that most people didn't even know was possible. I started speaking at conferences about identity theft and criminal justice reform. My story became a case study in how private prisons create perverse incentives for mass incarceration. Law students studied my case to understand how corruption can infiltrate court systems. I testified before a congressional subcommittee about the need for better oversight of private prison contracts. Standing at that witness table, looking at senators and representatives, I felt like I was finally turning my nightmare into something useful. The next time you hear about prison population statistics, I told them, remember that some of those numbers might be fake people like me. The system failed so completely that innocent citizens were sold into statistical slavery to boost corporate profits. The nightmares never completely stopped, but they changed from dreams about being arrested for crimes I didn't commit to dreams about fighting back against the system. Dr. Kim said that was a sign of healthy processing. You're not the victim anymore, she observed during one of our sessions. You're the advocate. That shift in identity, from victim to advocate, marked a turning point in my recovery. I wasn't just someone who had survived identity theft. I was someone who could prevent it from happening to others. The speaking engagements and advocacy work gave meaning to the trauma, transforming it from pure suffering into a force for systemic change. 5 years later, Sarah and I have 2 kids and a house in the suburbs of Denver. Our son's birth certificate lists my correct name with no criminal record attached. Our daughter will grow up in a world where I've helped strengthen identity theft protections and private prison oversight. Sometimes I still Google my name to make sure nothing strange appears, but it's become more of a quarterly check-in than the obsessive daily searching I used to do. The settlement money helped us buy our house and start our family, but more importantly, the experience taught me that identity is something you have to actively protect and defend. Nobody else will do it for you, and the systems we trust to protect us can fail catastrophically. Linda retired last year, but she still sends me updates about new identity theft cases and criminal justice reform legislation. The work we started with our class action lawsuit has led to federal laws requiring better verification for criminal convictions and stronger penalties for false record creation. Cornerstone Corrections went bankrupt and was dissolved, with its facilities sold to companies with better oversight. Dale Finch is still in federal prison, where hopefully he's learning what it actually feels like to be incarcerated. The fake court clerk who processed my conviction died of a heart attack 2 years into her sentence. I felt nothing when Linda told me about her death. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. Dr. Kim says I've made remarkable progress in rebuilding trust and moving forward with my life. The panic attacks are rare now, usually triggered only by situations involving government documents or background checks. I've learned to prepare for those moments with breathing exercises and positive self-talk. You know who you are, I remind myself when anxiety starts building. You have proof of your real life. The evidence binders Linda and I assembled during the legal battle sit in our home office, thick folders full of documents proving my innocence and identity. I haven't opened them in over a year, but knowing they exist gives me comfort. They're my insurance policy against anyone who might ever again try to steal my life. The strangest part of the whole experience was realizing how much of our identity depends on systems we never think about. Criminal databases, credit reports, background check services, they all form this invisible infrastructure that determines what opportunities we get in life. When someone corrupts that infrastructure, they can destroy you without ever meeting you face to face. But they can't change who you really are inside, and they can't take away the people who love you. Sarah and I renewed our vows on the 5th anniversary of the airport incident, surrounded by family and friends who had supported us through everything. As I looked into her eyes and repeated my promises, I realized that no amount of paperwork fraud could touch what we had built together. That's the identity that really matters. Thanks for hanging out until the end. If you enjoy diving into these kinds of stories, hit that sub button and stick around. And tell me in the comments what you think. I read through them all.